Hi everybody, this is Pawan. This is the third video we're making as part of the HCP training series that we have taken up. So to begin with, in HCP we are actually covering SAP UI5 topics because every HCP application that you deploy, it would have to be developed in SAP UI5. Also there's other options, but the runtimes that are available are Java, HTML5 and native XS. So HTML5 is a very good case, and also if you actually master HTML5, you could work with a lot of FIORI applications too. Okay, fine. So already there are already two videos prior to this, you could check. So in the first video we actually discussed the structure of a SAP UI5 application, what is an index.html, what is component.js, and so the basic fundamental concepts which are fundamental but not necessarily simple. So we pick code snippets in such a way that the concepts are made crystal clear. This is for benefit of everybody. So in the last videos we had discussed routing, how navigation is done, what is component.js. Then we had discussed what web IDE is. Web IDE is a cloud application that SAP provides, and it comes with HCP. By default you get a subscription to web IDE, so you could use some templates and build some projects. That is part of video 2. So what is it in video 3 that we are going to discuss? So SAP UI5 applications could be made responsive. That is, you build one application, okay, and it could run on the desktop, okay, and when you open the same application on your iPhone 5 or 6 or any iPhone or any mobile device, the UI controls actually adapt to the screen, so they're responsive. How is it done and all, we're going to see now. Okay, so enough of talking. Let us start off with some code. Get rid of this cam. Alright, so here we have our Eclipse. I have launched. So I have the project already loaded. What I want you to, I'm going to run the project first, so you see the output, and following which I'm going to walk you through the aspects of the code. Okay, so we're going to cover how this responsiveness is achieved, how the data flows, and pretty much all the important concepts in this video. So let me first start. So like the control, it starts with the index.html. okay, I have all my code within this folder here. Okay, so I think this part of the application I have already shown you. Fine, make it a full screen. Alright, so here okay, so I've already told this, but let me reiterate this again in this video, because suppose some of you have not viewed that video. Not going to take long, but yeah, it should be useful. So basically index.html is the starting point of a control for every UI5 application. So UI5 application is basically a HTML5 application in which you load your UI5 libraries or SAP UI5 libraries. So once you load these libraries, all the UI5 controls, they can be used. Okay, so sap.m is one of the library. Okay, SAP UI layout is another library. So resource roots, what is resource roots? Now index.html is at a certain position, so the position of this, or the parent folder of this, it is given a name. So this is the name we choose to give. It's a namespace that we choose to give. So this can be done so that the subsequent views that are there within that, okay, suppose relative to this position, the parent folder position of index.html, suppose we give that the name, this particular name, so the folder below that would be view, right, and the subsequent views within that would be app, and so on and so forth. So what we do here when we say resource roots is we could give some name to a folder location. So this is a way you can establish your namespace too. All right. So subsequently, our control comes to something called the shell. So this is also a sap.m control. So within the shell, we actually have an attribute called app. So when we say new, whenever we say new, we actually instantiate an object. So I'm going fast at this stage because all these topics I've already discussed in video 1 of the playlist, HCP. So okay, so we are actually instantiating something called the component container. Okay, so this is placed at the place at. Fine. Now that being said, let us first run this index.html and see the output, and then see how responsiveness is achieved for the UI5 application. Okay, it's running, fine, quick. I have the output. So I want to see it in my browser, that's Google Chrome. I don't use IE because it doesn't support UI5 very well. Okay, I have localhost, okay, my application is loaded. Now notice that the layout, or let's say floor plan for this, is like there's a splitter in between. Okay, this is the splitter. Okay, so the area of the screen to the left is kind of a list. Okay, and the area on the right is right now blank, but whenever you click any of this list item, the details would be rendered on the right hand side. So the splitter, there's a left hand side that has a list, and there's a detail on the right hand side. So this kind of a floor plan is called a master detail kind of application. Okay, also the kind of app that we use for this is a split app. Okay, that's a control, SAP-M control. Fine. So whenever I click a list item, you've seen that it has smoothly rendered on the right hand side, and this view that you're seeing right now is kind of a desktop kind of a view. Okay, I'm showing this to you on a large desktop, right? So per se, I go into, let me open my developer tools, because I want to simulate or emulate a different kind of output for you. So I'm going to go to developer tools, and here there's a top area wherein you have the sources and all these things, okay, source code and all. But then there's a bottom area, okay, wherein you have something called emulation. Fine. I'm going to go and say enable emulation. Fine. And then I'm going to choose certain device. Maybe let's choose something new. All right, iPhone 6. I refresh this. Okay, what you need to do is, once you do that, you need to actually refresh your application. So if you've noticed something, initially it was showing the master page on the left hand side of the splitter, and also it was showing the detail on the right hand side, but now it's just showing the master page. So when I click it, then it is showing me the detail page, right? So this is a kind of adaptation it does, and basically this is a responsive kind of a design, wherein it shows the if you actually launch it on a desktop, it's going to show you the full screen thing, but if you actually show it on something on a mobile phone, it's going to show you that master detail kind of view. Okay, fine. So now what I'm going to do is, this kind of master detail kind of a rendering is possible because of a certain app that we use, and that app is sap.m.split app. All right, fine. So now in the last example we used something which is just an app, sap.m.app, but what the split app does is it gives you a splitter in between, and at the left hand side is a master and the right hand side is a detail page, like you've seen. So now, having said that, let me walk you through the design of this application here. So, or the structure of the application. So we have one main view, which is the root view, okay, which is appview.js, which is here, okay, and then subsequently we have the master view, okay, and then the detail view, and then the line item view. All right, so you click this. This is the detail view that comes on the right hand side. Then this is the line item view. So the third one, XML view that you're seeing, line item view.xml, this is these line items here. So fine. So there's some sales orders, there's the detail, then there's line items within the order. So this is the kind of display. So I go here, this detail of that line item is rendered. So how is this achieved? So we're going to go into get into some technical details here, okay. So let me trace it back. Where does the control start from? The control starts from index.html. Fine. So this bootstrap, we know what it does, okay. So then the control comes to this script wherein a shell is instantiated. Within the shell, this component container is instantiated. Fine. So let us go to component.js, because whenever you say this component container and give this name, so this component.js, which has a fixed name, component.js, the file always has this name. This is instantiated. So what it is so we give it a name here. Fine. Okay. So what is done in component.js? So initially in the create content, we are actually instantiating a view. So what view is this? The view is view.app, that is app.view.js. So this would be your root view. The comment says here it is the root view. This is like if you compare it with WebDynPro or something, because most of us are familiar with that. There is in a WebDynPro application, you have something like a window, right? You have an application with which it is exposed. There's a component which is a global guy, then there is a window, and within that window you embed multiple views, right? In the same way, this guy here is the root view, okay. So all the master views are suppose there's a master view on the left hand side, there's a detail on the right hand side. This whole area is actually embedded inside the root view. Fine. Okay, so that is the reason we initially instantiate the root view. The control comes to the root view. Okay, fine. Now next we instantiate something called I18N model. It is used for internationalization. That is, you develop an application and the application is having all the texts in per se English, okay, and suppose you want to do an implementation for Canada where they need both English and French. So you're not going to develop the application again, right? We just want the translations to be done for all the static texts on the screen to begin with. So some of us already, most of us already know this. So we use something called I18N, wherein we use a file wherein we save all the texts to name the static texts on your application are all saved in a certain file. Okay, fine. Like OTR texts you see. Okay, okay, fine. So I'll come back to this, like what is the model, why are you setting it here and all, but at this point you know that the instantiation happens for the root view, and the root view is nothing but app.view.js. So let me actually trace my flow logic. So the flow actually, it starts from index.html from which this component is instantiated, which is your component.js, and the component.js, when you get into that, this root view is instantiated. So where should I go? I need to go into this root view to see what is getting instantiated. So set block display, it will see that you avoid the scroll bars on the screen. End to end your application is expanded. So next what happens? So here is the actual split app that we are instantiating. So when we look at this here, there is this master page, there is the detail page on the right hand side. This is the split app. So where are we instantiating the split app? We are doing it in the root view. Fine. Okay, it's done in the root view. So split app is a sap.m control, sap.m.split app. Okay, we instantiated, and you see a keyword here, which is this. What is this? This is something like a self-reference. If you're from Java background, it would be the most obvious thing to you. This is a self-reference for the object wherever the object is. Fine. In ABAP, it would be me. Like in a class, a self-reference would be me, me. Okay, fine. So what happens when we actually do this? So this view, app.view.js, would have a variable called app. Okay, and whatever application split app you're creating, you're putting a reference of this. Okay, the object reference of this is put inside this dot app variable. Okay, fine. Now next, what has to be done? Once your app is loaded, this master page that we have designed, which is a list, it will have to be instantiated and it will have to be loaded on the left hand side here, right? So that's exactly what we do here. So at the very first time it would not be instantiated, so we go ahead and we instantiate sap.ui.xml view and we instantiate the view. Fine. So and reference of that is put in master page. Okay, now notice what happens here. You have something called master.getController.nav. Okay, inside this we are putting something called this.getController. This is the most important step or piece of code in the entire application. I would say it's really beautiful. What it does is this, and there's one more place also where it is done. I'll just go to that, but this concept is very important. So what this does is master page, it will get it has a controller, like basically all our UI5 applications, they run on MVC architecture, like you know. So every view will have a view and a corresponding controller. Like you look at it here, the app.view.js, it is the view. Same way app.controller.js. So everything has a view which has the UI part, and then there is a logic, code logic, which is written inside the controller. Okay, fine. So first initially we get a reference to our view, and then we say, whenever we say dot get controller, it will have this piece would have a reference to the controller. Okay, now in the controller, what we do is we are actually having a variable called nav. Inside that, in the variable, we are going to store the reference to app views controller, not app view as such, but app views controller. So think of it this way: this guy here is like the root view, it's like the global view. Okay, I wouldn't say global, but yeah, we are trying to make it global. How are we doing that is, see, in the control flow, first this guy is instantiated. Okay, so now what we are doing is two important things. In this root views variable called app, we are saving the reference to split app. Okay, and at the same time, in every views, not only master, here I am just showing you that master view has a controller, and it inside we are choosing a variable called nav, and inside that we are putting this app views controller reference. But it's not just true for this, but every single view that we instantiate in this application other than the root view, we are going to perform this step. What happens in essence of this? So every single view that is instantiated will have a controller, and which is obvious. So then in the controller's variable called nav, we are going to put the reference to this root views controller. Okay, so that way every view will have access to the root views controller. Okay, so once you have it in a variable of your own controller, you are almost having a reference to this. You would have seen this. This is a common practice used in different UIs, not just UI5, but if you are an experienced UI developer, even in other UI paradigms also we do this kind of a thing. We have a root view, which is the main guy, so we give its reference in different sub views, so that we can call the global guys methods or something like that. Okay, fine. Okay, so now this master view, we have now this dot app, which means the split app. Okay, and then we have the split app sap.m.app has a certain method called add page. Okay, so we are going to add the master page to it. Fine. Okay, so also there's a second parameter we pass to it, which is true in this case. So what this does is it's going to render it on the left hand side, and it is saying that whatever page you load, it is a master page, so it will be rendered on the left hand side. So just by giving a name called master, it won't become a master page. So whenever this command, when you are executing, when you're saying add page, okay, split app dot add page, when your parameter is true, it's going to consider it as a master page. Fine. So now at the very first time, the very first time you load the app, you want the right hand side to be empty or blank. So for that reason, we instantiate an empty view, and we add that also to the app. So we say empty, and then we say false, that means it's not a master page, so it's launched on the right hand side. Fine. Okay, fine. So now we're going to say return this dot app. This will return it to whoever is calling it. So component.js is calling it. Fine. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we'll okay, let me run it again. So during initialization, what happens is what we have discussed now. Okay. Oh God. My Chrome is blank. Let me go back here. So index.html, I want to run it. Fine. So what I want to do now is so the control that we have discussed until now is the index.html is instantiated, then component.js, and then the split app, which actually enables us to have this master page and detail page on the right. So why is this right side blank? Because we have actually loaded, sorry, get back here, we've actually added this empty view. Okay, now let me debug this a bit. I want to show you the navigation part here, and there is no fun in walking through a UI5 application unless you debug it. For that matter, any programming language, I think debugging is the best way to get to know it. So this is Mac, but suppose you are using something else, like you're using your Microsoft, okay, Windows, so you could and you're using Chrome, you could just use F12 and debug. Okay, so like you see on the right hand side, all I see is I have my index.html, my component.js, okay, and my app view.js, my master controller. So the detail view has not been loaded yet. Okay, the reason being the control has not reached that point. Fine. So what I want to do is, I know that when I navigate, like, because I know this application, I know that when I navigate, the control will come to app.controller, that is root views controller. So I would want to go and put a breakpoint over there. Okay, also I want to get rid of this device mode, so I'll just go and close that. Okay, suppose I want to emulate it again, I'd use the same thing. Fine. So I get rid of the device mode. So now I want to go and put my breakpoint. So where would I do that? So notice that when I open my debugger, there's a lot of tabs here. You need to go to this sources tab, okay, and when you see there's a tree structure on the right hand side, and only those files would be loaded where the control has hit so far, okay. And in the debugger also you have something like you see all your watch points and all here. You see the call stack here, the breakpoints you have set would be shown here, okay. So master is something I've added maybe the last time I debugged it, so I'm going to delete it. Fine. Okay, so I go to app.controller, and before that I want to show you something else. Okay, so what I could do is suppose I'm comfortable seeing it on the side and not in the bottom. So but what you could do is you could show it like this in the bottom also, okay. I like to see it side by side because I like to, that way I can compare. So I'll go to this, and you could see this is dock to bottom, so this is dock to the right, okay. This is one way. Or you could actually remove it altogether and show it in a separate window. See, this way it's more comfortable this way, but somehow it differs from developer to developer. I like to see it on the right hand side. Fine. So this way I look at the code, I know what's going on here. Fine. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I know that the control is going to come to this particular method too. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. Fine. Why it's going to come here, I'll tell you. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and then one more important line here would be line number 20. Like I said, even in the master view, any page that is instantiated, right, any view that is instantiated, like here we are instantiating the view for the very first time, because you first check if it is null, and if it is null then you are instantiating it. I'll go in detail, you don't have to worry about it, but basically you get a reference to the pages controller, and then in that controller, every view in this application, you have a variable called nav, and inside that you pass this. What is this? This is nothing but the reference to the controller of app.controller, because now we are inside app.controller. So we put this app.controller's reference inside every views nav variable inside this project. Okay, fine. So now right now where is my control? I am there in this master view, okay, and suppose if I click any of these line items, what is supposed to happen? So it is supposed to actually load an event, okay. So now let me see what that event is. So going to put a breakpoint here, okay. So it should come to these things. So suppose when I click any of these things, so as I saw this is the very first time, and so it has come to 2. And click it again, go to master controller. Guess I'll have to load it again, this application, for the breakpoints to take effect. Okay, fine, great. I put the breakpoint on 27, it did not trigger, but on 28 it is triggering. Could be some reason. Okay, fine. So when you say handle list select, right, let me get rid of the unnecessary breakpoints. Okay, fine. So whenever you click one particular list item, what exactly is happening? Let us observe. So it gets the context. So basically an event is propagated. So we try to get now the parameter called list item, and we try to get its context. That's another thing. But what you need to notice here is we are trying to fire navigation using this particular statement here, which says this.nav.to. Now what is this.nav.to? like we have seen, when you go to app.controller, whenever a view is instantiated, like I told you in line number 20 here, or if you look at your master view also, let me okay, in the app.view, whenever you are instantiating this master view, you have done something. In the master controller, you have a variable called nav, and to that nav you are passing the reference of the controller of which controller, this app.views controller. So when we go back to the debugger here, hang on, where are we? Okay, we are in this master.controller. So here, when you are at the statement, what is this? This is our master controller, and it has a variable called nav. So what does this.nav have? It essentially has a reference to your app.controller. Okay, so when you're saying this.nav, it's equivalent to saying app.controller. Okay, so now this is equal to saying app.controller dot to. So you are invoking a method called to inside this app.controller. Fine, and you're passing some parameters called detail, and you're passing a context. What is the context? You're passing the context of whichever line item is clicked. Fine. Okay, let me go to that next point. Fine. I have to put some more breakpoints here. Okay, fine. So apparently, if you put your breakpoint on the function call, it wouldn't stop, but you need to put it inside the code, which makes sense, complete sense. Okay, fine. So you go to line number 10. Sorry, the to method of the app.controller is called. Okay, and the parameters that we have passed is detail, which is the page ID, and we are passing the context of whichever line item has been selected. Fine. Now how does this control flow? Okay, so let me breakpoint here. It's going to add the page. Okay, fine. So what it does is, basically it is going to add the page, and I'd want to see what is the page ID of this thing. So page ID is detail. I could also add it to the watch point. Okay, so what happened is, over these steps here, one would expect that it would enter this control here, that is this logic over here, but it did not enter this if block. The reason being, the detail view has already been instantiated once, because while I was clicking these presses, right, multiple times, the detail view has already been instantiated, and we have a reference already to the detail page. Fine. So it has been instantiated, so it will not once again go and create a detail view here. Okay, so I'll okay, so now what happens is, we have app. So app is nothing but it is a reference to your split app. Okay, because we have said this dot app over there. So we are going to say dot to and then add the page ID, which is our detail page. So what this step will do is, it will let you add the detail page. Fine. So the master page is added. Now it's going to add the detail page, and what we are going to do is, we are going to set a context. Previously maybe some other line item is clicked, and now when we click a new line item, on the right hand side also the context has to be updated, right? So that kind of an update we actually handle by passing, we do this thing, event.get parameter list item. List item is the UI element name, and then we say get binding context. So what that will do is, for that particular row, it is going to get us the context, and that will be set to the view as such. Okay, so you set the binding context, and what will get loaded now is the detail controller. Fine. All right. Okay, so similarly, whenever you click any line item here, first this handle list select will get triggered, then this dot nav2, which essentially means app.controller.to will get triggered. So you pass this parameter like the target page name, and then you pass the binding context. So notice that by using this dot nav.to, now nav is not any keyword or anything, but what we are achieving by this is we are having an alternative to routing. So in the video 1 we had discussed what routing is, the route match handler and all these things, but now this is an alternative method for when we use split apps. This is how we could do navigation. But let me tell you that all the FIORI apps use the router, and routing is the way to go. But this is also a style of programming, and I'm discussing this is very relevant. And this kind of having a global variable and using that for navigation, it's not done just in UI5, but like I said, in different UI paradigms. Okay, fine. Get rid of this. Now what I want to do is I want to load the application again and show you the detail page when it is loaded for the first time. Okay, fine. This is the very first time it is running. Okay, so it is loaded, and let me see what are the controls that are loaded. Index.html, component.js, then app.view.js would be loaded, app.controller.js, and then master view would be loaded. Okay, now what I want to show is within this app.controller, okay, let me put a breakpoint here. So I want to show that how the detail page is instantiated. The last time when we ran, this piece of code was skipped. Okay, we want to see if this will be run now. Fine, and we go here and we see that our breakpoint is set. So I'll click the one ending with 3, the order. Okay, and I'm going to just take one step further. Fine, so just want to observe what is here. Okay, so basically you know that JavaScript we are using zero based index. Fine, so whenever we say this thing event.get parameter, list item is the name of the UI control list over there that we're using, get binding context. So it's going to get us an S path. Okay, this S path, the initial one is your sales order collection, and the sales order collection is bound to the list that is shown on the left hand side. Now you're seeing something called 3 over here. What is this 3? So it is the 4th item that is selected, and you see that it is 3 because the indexing, it starts from 0 based index. So because you've selected the 4th one, it shows the number 3. So that is the context. So we are saying that what is the context? So we are saying that its path is that the entity set is sales order collection, and we have to choose the 3rd item over there. Okay, that kind of information is given, and we are passing it also in order to navigate. So this nav doesn't have any special significance. It is just a variable of this app.controller. I reiterate. Okay, so by saying this dot nav, you are actually calling a method of app.controller, and the method is the to method. So you're passing this detail and context. Fine. So for the very first time, the detail page is going to be launched. So let us see how it is done. Okay, let me minimize this, or let me leave it because it is relevant. Fine, and if it helps. Okay, so fine, I've zoomed this code for you, and if you would want to see here, you put a breakpoint here, handle list. Fine. So this context here, this was having our value. So fine. So the detail page, for the very first time, it has to be launched on the right hand side. So let us see when I'm just be repeating, because this is very important. So this .nav means app.controller's reference, and .to means we are calling the to method of this app.controller. So here's the to method. So what happens when a view has to be launched the very first time? So I come here, so what this particular step does is, there's a variable called master. Okay, you need to know whether it's a master page or detail page, because when you're adding, you will pass a true or false based on that. Okay, so we find out using this parameter, and we know that it is not a master page, its page ID is not master, it's detail. So obviously we'll save a value called false in that. Okay, so next we are going to get into this. Okay, so what this does is, it's basically saying that the view has not been loaded so far, because what we are saying is this app, split app, this app has a reference to our split app, right? So the very first time we saw it was here in app.view.js. So we have instantiated this new sap.m.split app and put its reference in this .app. This is the very first time we referred to this. Okay, subsequently we have referred to it here, this .app, which is nothing but reference to your split app. The reason for this splitter over here, master detail page, we are using a method called add page. Okay, here also we are using this method called add page. So when you say pass that page's reference, so you instantiate the page initially, pass the page's reference, and when you pass a true, it will be loaded to the left hand side. When you pass a false, it will be loaded to the right hand side. This is a very simple way to say it. Okay, fine. Now the same guy, this app, we are referencing it. We have used some methods. What is the method we used? We used the method called add page. Fine. Then we are now using a method called get page. So we are passing the page ID. In our case here, page ID would be detail. Okay, yeah, you see it here, it's detail. So we are passing the detail page name, and we are passing if it is loaded in the right hand side or left hand side. So basically we are it's loaded on the right hand side, so it's not a master, so this parameter will have a false here. Okay, so you saw a method previously called add page, now you are doing a get page. So I pass my page ID, which is detail, and I get a result called null. Okay, so if had the page been loaded, it would have given us the reference for that page, okay, which we would use subsequently. So now because it is not loaded and it's the very first time, you see it's blank here, there's an empty page, so you have to instantiate it. Fine. So how do you instantiate it? You say sap.ui.view and you pass its parameters. Its page ID would be detail page, and this would be the name of the view. Okay, so you're writing it in a generic way so that be it a detail view or be it anything, there could be a line item view. So at runtime it will take the page ID and concatenate, generate the view name. Okay, and this path here for the view name is the design time path. Okay, so it would be the folder structure or namespace dot the folder path. Okay, fine, and the type of the view is the XML view. So in this step you actually instantiate the view for the very first time. So subsequent times the control runs here, it is not going to go get into this if loop. Okay, so because you are instantiating the view for the first time, we do this step also, which I said is a very important step because it will help you navigate going forward. So within that newly created view, we are going to get the reference of the controller of that, and within the controller we have a variable called nav in which we put a reference to this root view. Okay, fine. So now that we put it, so subsequently we can use this reference to do our navigation. So whenever any view you go and you say this dot nav, right, how does that happen? It happens because of this very step here that we are doing. Yeah, this very step, line number 20. So what this does is it will save this app.control as reference, okay, here and now. So because of this, whenever you go into any view, the navigation is possible by saying this dot nav, and 2 would actually, okay, fine, just overwritten some code here, okay, fine. So fine, but that being said, you have instantiated the detail view, okay, and you want to now add that view to this split app. All right, fine, get rid of this, okay, fine. So what I do now is, now this split app is kind of a container or something like that, okay, root view, and you have added the detail view to it. But if for it to get rendered, you need to use this particular command of split app which says 2, okay. This 2 is a different 2 compared to this 2 function which is part of app.controller. This app is a reference to your sap.m.split app, which you know, okay, and it has a standard method, library method called 2, okay, just like it has a method called add page and get page, it has a method called 2, okay. So you use this method and you navigate passing the page ID reference, fine, fine. So now technically it would launch, or it would after this command, whenever the debugger is released, it's going to load the page, detail page. But what is very important is that always the detail page is going to be the same for each of these line items, but the data has to be different, right? So that is the reason what we do is we are going to set the binding context. So context is something that we have received via navigation here, okay. So this context, it says that boss, now sales order collection 3 item is selected. So what this does is it's going to set that context to the detail page, fine. All right, so let me just fight it. So being a responsive designer, it's just showing you this detail page, but yeah, so you can see its responsiveness here. You see this? Yeah, fine. All right, so now we have navigated and we have seen this, fine. So now one step further, if I want to navigate to the line item level, because suppose you see here there's a view also called line item view.xml, okay. This is the line item view.xml. So it has to navigate to this. So let me go back here, and when I click this, okay, so once again the control comes. So wherever you use navigation, the control will come back to this app.controller. You have this 2 method, the control would come here. All right, so again the same steps. So for the very first time, this detail line item view is launched. So yeah, it's executing all these. So again the context is put. Now let us see what the context is. See, the first item is hit, right, HT1104 of this thing. So let us see the context, how it's going to show. So this is the context path. So it says sales order collection, the third item of that is selected, and of the third item, of the line items, the 0th one, that means the first one, because it's a 0 based index, that is selected. So that is the context we are going to set binding context for the view that is loaded. All right, okay. So that particular view is launched, fine, okay. So now I hope after all this the navigation concept is clear, and how a split app is structured, that is clear, the master detail page and so on and so forth. I want to show you something else now. Okay, that is let me open the component.js, fine, and give me a moment here, trying to oh, there's no volume problem on the video. I'm just trying to do something here. I'm thinking of which is the best way to do it. Okay, fine. So suppose I look at this piece of code here. All right, let me go through a sequence. Shown you multiple times, but this is kind of important. So you start your control from index.html, fine, and then you subsequently land up in component.js. You know how that happened, but here I've said that I'm using something here. So model, what is a model? So when I showed you navigation from one view to the other view, what I did was set something called context, right? So how does this context actually develop, or how is it in place? How is the data coming in there, right? So all that is handled by model. So the UI elements and all are part of the view, right? They are all sap.m controls that you are adding. But how does the data come? Where is the data container? So in the first video we had shown you how to create an OData model, okay, and how it hits the backend, something like that. But for this example we are actually using a static model here, okay. This example has a static model. The data is there on your project itself. So there's this mark.json file which has entity called sales order collection, fine, and yeah, this is the structure. So this is the guy having the data, fine. So but you see that there's a model here, I18N model, then there's another model, this is for the data, right, and then there's a model called device model. So what is this model? So in your project, the things that are holding the data are your models, right? You see this model, view, controller, the paradigm. In this is the model part, okay. So the different types of models that are possible that I told you earlier too. There could be an OData model, okay, there could be a JSON model, there could be an XML model, okay. So we are in this case we are using a JSON model, okay. So the way you instantiate it is new sap.ui.model, okay. Suppose if it is OData model, you would have an OData keyword here and then OData model here, okay. So this part could have a URL, or it could have a file path if it is static, or yeah, something like that, okay. So this very step here we are actually instantiating the model, right. This very step we are instantiating the model. Let me do something, let me show it to you in the browser. The same component.js, I'm just staying with this flow here. I'm going to show you this model in the browser. So the same file component.js, I'm going to open it here. The reason being I want to zoom the text and show you. All right. So here you have these models, right? Component.js, this is where we were. So this is the I18N model. Like I said, it's for internationalization, and this is the JSON model here. So you can instantiate using new sap.ui.model, JSON model, okay, and give the path, okay, of wherever your data is. And then when you say oview.set model, okay, where is your control? What is oview? So oview is your root app view. This is the main guy, the main container in which all the rest of the views are embedded, right? So one thing I want to mention here is that suppose you have UIs, like there's a main view and within which you embed subsequent views, within which you embed maybe some panel and within which a list, something like that. So suppose you set the model, like using this command here, you set the model at the topmost level. All the UIs that come subsequently under it, they are going to inherit that model. Okay, that is rule number 1. That is, top level UI will propagate the model to all the embedded UIs inside it, right? So by applying this model at the top level here, the root view, it is going to be available to the master view, it's going to be available to the detail view, it's going to be available to the line item view. Fine, point made. Now the second thing I want to say here is that a certain application could have more than one model. Like this is used for data, right? And this is used for the static texts or for internationalization, right? And this is used for device model. I'll tell you what device model is, but there's different kinds of data. And also so what I'd say is that all these 3 models, we set them to the same view using a method called set model. Okay, every view has a method called set model actually. Basically you pass model as a parameter and you pass a name to that. So there can exist only one unnamed model. You see, this is not a named model, whereas this is a named model. Okay, there can exist only one unnamed model, and that will be the default model. Okay, fine. Now suppose you say I18N, how are you going to access the data? Let me go to where can I do that? Okay, I'll have to go to Eclipse, because the views are XML views, they are not launched here in the debugger. So suppose I have used an I18N model, right? So this I18N model, where do I use it? So whenever I want to show any text, I don't actually hard code it, but I actually use this I18N, okay, arrow, and then whatever is the property name that I want to use. So where is this I18N? It should be in this folder I18N, okay, message bundle dot properties. Fine. Okay, so all these things, they have a key here, and then they have a text. Suppose you have more than one languages that you want to handle, so you'll have more than one property files, each for a particular language. Fine. Okay, so that's how, suppose you want to reference a named model, what you're going to do is you're going to give the name of the model initially, followed by an arrow and then the path. Suppose I want to reference an unnamed model per se for my data is in mock.json, but when I created a model for that, I did not give it a name. So when I want to reference that, I'm going to give a slash and say like sales order collection. I don't have to give it a name because it's a default model. There's only one unnamed model, which is the default model. Okay, just want you to remember that. And if it's a named model, you know how you actually reference it. Fine. So that's about it. Now the next thing is, what are the different ways in which you instantiate a model? In the video 1, we had instantiated a model using URL, right? And suppose now we are instantiating a JSON model using a file, right? Giving a file path. Okay. Now one more thing I want to and this is also using a file path here. But one thing you will have to notice here is that the model here is sap.ui.model.resource, and then it's a resource model. Now why is it a resource model? So what it does is, suppose you see the product text over here, right? Where is it coming from? It's a static text that's coming from this I18N properties file. Okay. Why is it like that? Because suppose you want to call it in French, I don't know what product is in French, but it would automatically translate it, right? Now how is the data flow for this kind of a requirement? It's going to be one way always, right? The client is never, the user is never going to want to change the static text on the screen, so it's going to be rendered one way. So the data flow for this kind of a resource model is a one-way flow. Okay, fine. Whereas for a JSON model, the default is a two-way flow. You can set the data flow to one way. Okay, fine. Next thing is this kind of a model here. Now this is a device model. Okay, and we are instantiating a JSON model here for that. And see this kind of a notation where it says is phone and colon and then something here. This is a JSON notation. Okay, you could either give it a file path like you saw, you gave it like a mock.json here. Hang on, where is that? Yeah, there's a mock.json here. This is a file path that we are giving. You could either do this or you could directly declare it here. In this case, we need to declare it because we are creating parameters called isPhone, and then we have this jQuery.device.isPhone. This is a variable. So what we do is now I've shown you that the device is the application is responsive. Now how is the application responsive? So because it actually reads these properties of the device model, and there's this property called isPhone, okay, which is going to be having the value whether if you run it on a phone, it's going to tell you that it will be either true or something like that, right? Okay. So now again there is something called list mode here, right? So if this is going to evaluate to true, so it's going to be single select master, otherwise it's going to be none, right? Okay, something like that. So fine. So where is this device model actually used? So I want to go to master view, which I may not be able to do it from this point. So I'll go to Eclipse and I'll just maximize this. So here I have a list, right? The master view has a list. So within this, the mode, I can give this mode whether it is none or single select master. So here I'm going to give, like, because it's a named model, I call it device, and then subsequently I give this list model. So this will make your list actually responsive, right? Fine. Okay. So in different places like that, we could actually use this to make it responsive. So yeah. So let me just see if there's anything else with this particular app, split app, that I want to cover. So here's the debugger, these are the views that are loaded, model is covered. Great. So I think that's pretty much it for this video. I'll be coming up with more videos. Basically the scope of this is a larger scope, which is for HCP, and because we need to be UI5 developers, UI5 is a skill required for HCP development, we are covering this too. Yes, but I think all the topics would be covered, all the UI5 topics. Thank you all for staying and following this. Yeah, thank you. You have a nice day. Bye.